Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Kelly Crocker, and I'm one of the ministers here. Today I'm joined by my colleague, the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, and the worship team of Linda Warren, Stephen Gregorius, Daniel Carnes. A very special thank you to the members of our Meeting House Chorus for gifting us with music this morning. Thank you all. And a special thanks to all those volunteering in many roles today, our greeters, ushers, hospitality providers, lay ministers, and sound technicians. At First Unitarian Society, we question boldly, listen humbly, grow spiritually, act courageously, and love unapologetically. If you're visiting us today, welcome. We're so very glad that you are with us. If you would like more information about our activities and programs, please stop by the welcome table after service out in the commons next to the elevator. We also hope that you'll be able to stay and join us for coffee hour immediately after service, also right out in the commons. After service today, if you want to grab a beverage and head upstairs to the Hearth Room, which is the area in the back of our landmark auditorium, the Climate Action Team is hosting a workshop sharing our climate stories. This is to inspire ourselves and one another to take action in ways that we can regarding our climate crisis. That's immediately following service across the building over in the Hearth Room. And we know that tomorrow, of course, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and there are events in Madison at noon at the Capitol, at 5 p.m. at the Overture Center. We know this is a complicated day for many reasons. Our lay ministers will be here over in the Hearth Room with a communal altar that will be outside the Hearth Room, available for anyone who wants to stop by throughout this coming week. But lay ministers will be here inside the Hearth Room tomorrow. If you would like to come, have a moment of reflection, take part in a communal ritual of grief and of hope, and chat with our lay ministers some. They'll be here throughout the day. There's more information in the red floors. And for those of you connecting with us virtually today, we're glad that you are with us as well. We hope you'll be able to take a moment and watch the announcement slides shown again immediately after today's service. And now, I invite us into a moment of silence as we center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time, joining together once again in community. Come, let us gather in this sacred space of memory and possibility.
Here we come to remember and to dream anew.
In the tapestry of time, we hold the thread of stories that have shaped us. Stories of courage that echo through generations. Stories of a man who dared to dream of beloved community. Stories etched in the streets of Selma and the steps of Washington.
We carry these stories in our bones, in our breath, in our being.
Today we honor Martin Luther King Jr., whose voice still ripples through time, whose footsteps we follow when the path seems dark, whose dream we nurture when hope feels distant.
In our remembering, we find strength for tomorrow.
Though the journey ahead may be long, though the road may wind through shadow and light, we stand together, holding faith with those who came before, drawing courage from their wisdom, their struggles, their triumphs.
Here in this circle of memory and hope, we kindle the flame of possibility. We lift our voices in song and story. We open our hearts to the work that remains, and together we dare to dream again.
Come, beloveds, and let us worship together. And we invite you now to rise in all the ways we do. Join together in our words of affirmation as we kindle our chalice. We tender this flame, opening the book, turning to a page yet to be written, opening a story yet to be told. May we fill this fresh page wisely. May we write a new story into being. May we together inscribe the page with hope. And before we join together in song, we invite you to take a moment to turn and greet those around you.
Friends, let's sing together, shall we? I'm going to invite you to join me in number 116. I'm on my way. This is in your silver and gray hymnals, if you have them. But please note there is a slight lyrics change. So there are five verses. There we go. That's what I was looking for. 5 verses in the hymnal. We're going to sing 4 together. So if you're following along in the hymnal, verses 2 and 3 have been consolidated. So please pay attention to lyrics on the screen. Thank you. 116. God.
It is time once again to celebrate our children's religious exploration program with our annual banner parade. Each of our classes has created a banner which reflects the things that they are talking about and thinking about and caring about throughout this year. From preschool through 9th grade, our children and youth explore, create, and grow together. Following the parade, our banners will be hung out in the Commons area, making that space even more beautiful. And we're gonna wait 1 minute, Leslie, because there's some kids in the room coming to join their classes. Look at me stalling as I... Anyway, this is very joyful. Feel free to clap. Feel free to wave. Feel free to let our kids know how much we love and appreciate them. And now it is time for our banner parade.
going to sing again. We're going to sing what is number 149, also in the silver and gray hymnal. This is Lift Every Voice and Sing. What you may or may not know is unofficially designated as the Black National Anthem. I came up singing this song. I think of it as being a normal element of American civic life to need to know the lyrics to this song. I came to realize in adulthood that's not a universal experience, but I believe that it should be. Black history is American history, after all. Now, in singing this song together, some of us may be left with a feeling of like, well, wait, this song doesn't feel very much like it's about me. That's okay. That's part of the experience. We're going to sing verses 1 and 3. Please rise in body and or spirit.
Our inspiration today from the great and recently of late, Nikki Giovanni. This is for the Pullman porters who organized when people said they couldn't and carried the Pittsburgh Courier and the Chicago Defender to the Black Americans in the South so they would know they were not alone. This is for the Pullman porters who helped Thurgood Marshall go south and come back north to fight the fight that resulted in Brown v. Board of Education, because even though Kansas is west, and even though Topeka is the birthplace of Gwendolyn Brooks, who wrote the powerful "The Chicago Defender Sends a Man to Little Rock," it was the Pullman porters who whispered to the traveling men, both the blues men and the race men, so that they both would know what was going on. This is for the Pullman porters who smiled as if they were happy and laughed like they were tickled when some folks were around, and who silently rejoiced in 1954 when the Supreme Court announced its 9-0 decision that separate is inherently unequal. This is for the Pullman porters who smiled and welcomed a 14-year-old boy onto their train in 1955. They noticed his slight limp that he tried to disguise with a doo-wop walk. They noticed his stutter and probably understood why his mother wanted him out of Chicago during the summer when school was out. 14-year-old black boys with limps and stutters are apt to try to prove themselves in dangerous ways when mothers aren't around to look after them. So this is for the Pullman porters who looked after that 14-year-old while the train rolled the reverse of the Blues Highway from Chicago to St. Louis to Memphis to Mississippi. This is for the men who kept him safe. And if Emmett Till had been able to stay on a train all summer, he would have maybe grown a bit of a paunch, certainly lost his hair, probably have worn bifocals and bounced his grandchildren on his knee, telling them about his summer riding the rails. But he had to get off the train and ended up in Money, Mississippi, and was horribly, brutally, inexcusably, and unacceptably murdered. This is for the Pullman porters who, when the sheriff was trying to get the body secretly buried, got Emmett's body on the northbound train, got his body home to Chicago, where his mother said, "I want the world to see what they did to my boy." And this is for all the mothers who cried. And this is for all the people who said, "Never again." And this is about Rosa Parks, whose feet were not so tired. It had been, after all, an ordinary day, until the bus driver gave her the opportunity to make history. This is about Mrs. Rosa Parks from Tuskegee, Alabama, who was also the field secretary of the NAACP. This is about the moment Rosa Parks shouldered her cross, put her worldly goods aside, was willing to sacrifice her life so that that young man in Money, Mississippi, who had been so well protected by the Pullman porters, would not have died in vain. When Mrs. Parks said no, a passionate movement was begun. No longer would there be a reliance on the law, there was a higher law. When Mrs. Parks brought that light of hers to expose the evil of the system, the sun came and rested on her shoulders, bringing the heat and the light of truth. Others would follow Mrs. Parks. 4 young men in Greensboro, North Carolina, would also say no. Great voices would be raised singing the praises of God and exhorting us to forgive those who trespass against us. But it was the Pullman porters who safely got Emmett to his granduncle, and it was Mrs. Rosa Parks who could not stand that death, and in not being able to stand it, she sat back down.
I want to start with a story from the Buddhist tradition about a great and mighty king. And you know what it means in stories when the king is great and mighty, don't you? It means he's good at killing things, good at making war, has a lot of soldiers around him so that when he goes out with his armies, all of his neighbors tremble. And his subjects feared him too, because even in times of peace, he made a point of going on great hunts to show again his power, to prove how good he was at killing things. So it was that one day, from the top of his horse, he went out on a hunt and he saw in the distance an ibex. Now, an ibex is like a supersized goat. This one had a long, sweeping set of horns that arced all the way back so they almost touched its rear end. It was as tall as I am, and when he saw it, the king said, I will kill that ibex, and everyone will see how powerful I am. So off, like a shot, he raced on his horse, leaving behind all of his retainers, all of his retinue. They were too slow to keep up, but that ibex was fast, and more importantly, it was smart. It knew the land well, and it knew a place where there was a chasm, a great breach in the earth, and so it led the chase in that direction, and it got to the edge of the chasm and leapt to the other side. Now, the horse was a good horse, but it didn't know the territory. And it came to the edge of the chasm, and it stopped. But the king kept going. And he fell head over heels down into the chasm, and he broke both of his legs, lying down there at the bottom of the chasm, knowing that no one knew where he was at this point. He realized he had lost. Now, for reasons that he did not understand, the ibex came back. It turned around, it looked down into the hole at the king at the bottom there, and the king looked up at the ibex and said, "Oh, great ibex, you have won. You have bested me, for I will surely die here." And the ibex hopped down into the chasm so that it got right up close to the king, and it looked him right in the eye. And at that moment, the king thought he heard the ibex speak and say, "Is taking a life the only way that I can show you my power?" And then the ibex turned around. It got down onto its back legs so that the king could climb up on its back, and it carried the king up out of that chasm, back to his horse, back to safety. The king went back to his palace. He was very quiet for a long time, and then he gathered all of his retinue, all of his generals together, and he told them, "I have decided I will no longer go hunting, and that I will not make war anymore." And everyone was confused, the generals especially, but everyone wanted to know why. And all that he would say when they asked was, "Is taking a life the only way that I can show you my power?" This past week marked the birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The national holiday that honors him will be observed tomorrow. This is the season of the year when, by civic agreement, his memory is most often invoked and his words most often repeated. This time of public remembrance and veneration comes with a certain peril, however. Dr. Cornel West described this problem some years ago as the Santa Clausification of Dr. King. King was feared by the established order and by agents of the status quo throughout his life, even unto the point of that life being stolen from him. But today he is routinely appropriated into the mainstream and conjured to defend the status quo, or even to throw the cloak of sanctimony over the shoulders of retrograde policies. A former agent of radical change becomes a generic symbol, sanitized and unthreatening. America's most famous outside agitator of the 20th century becomes just another thing for school children to sing about. Another reason, and I wish I were making this up, for a sale at the Gap. As Dr. West says, celebrity status operates in such a way that it tries to diffuse the threat and to sugarcoat and deodorize what actually is rather funky. for a man who gave so much to the causes he believed in, and again, ultimately lost his life in the course of following his conscience. Those celebrations of his holiday which swerve into the anodyne, the non-threatening, seem to me a particular betrayal of what they purport to valorize. It is as Ossie Davis, the actor and activist, said of Paul Robeson, the great musician, performer, and agitator of about a generation and a half before King. Ossie said of Paul, "A hero to all, gigantic and available, and as with all heroes, the gift was one way. Paul gave and gave, we took and took and took. All of us, black folks, white folks, communists, liberals, artists, politicians, race leaders, labor leaders, we raided him. To us, he was an inexhaustible bounty from heaven, and we went to him as beggars go, never bothering to put anything back, fighting the world and each other for our inalienable right to consume Paul Robeson, and consume him we did." If we are to mark the occasion of Martin Luther King's day, and I believe that we should, let us take pains not to consume him. Rather than slipping into purple prose and reassuring rhetoric, let us stay grounded in some of the simple facts of his life in all their challenging particularity. If the telling of some part of his story does not leave us at least slightly challenged and uncomfortable, then it has not been told correctly. Dr. King was an activist for racial justice as well as a strong opponent of the war in Vietnam. Indeed, of all wars prosecuted, fomented, or underwritten by this country and its military anywhere on earth. He was also a campaigner for broad, transformative economic justice throughout this country. He managed to survive numerous threats to and attempts on his life in the fight for voting rights, integration of schools and businesses, and other basic human rights for African Americans. It was the economic justice campaign that was actually his focus when he was murdered in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King's ideals and ideas all mattered a great deal, but what he accomplished in life and what his memory still accomplishes after his death ultimately hangs on what he was willing to risk in order to follow his values. He was willing to risk more than comfort or convenience, more than his good name or his worldly possessions. He was willing to risk his life for the work in which he believed. Now it happens that there are two people from our own tradition connected to Martin Luther King's story through that same willingness to risk dying and that same tragic price that he paid. So I want to tell you, or at least remind you, of their stories as they relate to his. In the late winter of 1965, American attention turned in fits and starts toward Selma, Alabama. It began in February when Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed by a state trooper there. Jimmy was a young black man, and his crime was protesting for his right to vote and to register other black people to vote. In the natural outrage that followed, a march was planned from Selma to the state capitol in Montgomery. Dr. King was among the organizers, and he issued a national call for people of goodwill to come to Selma and join the marchers. The story goes that Unitarian Universalist ministers and lay leaders were among the first folks from outside of Alabama to answer that call. I cannot validate that they were first, but they were certainly there among many others. We know that nearly 50 of our ministers arrived there as requested, and that among them was the Reverend James Reeb. He was 38 at the time, and just like nearly everyone else there, he had a family. In his case, a wife and 4 children. Everyone who took part in that march was risking their life. They were largely repeating, after all, the same action for which Jimmy Lee Jackson was killed. On March 9th, 1965, Jim Reeb had been in Selma for a few days and was actually planning to return home. He and 2 other Unitarian Universalist ministers were walking back to where they were staying in Selma when they were attacked by a group of 4 white men who targeted them as outside agitators. Reeb was struck badly in the head. He died from the injury 2 days later. Just after the news of Jim's death began to spread, another Unitarian Universalist, a lay woman named Viola Liuzzo, was making the decision to travel from Detroit to Selma to do what she could do to join the ongoing protest there. Viola was 39 and had a husband and 5 children. She used her car to ferry marchers between locations that were too far to walk, and for this reason, being seen driving in a car with a black man, she was targeted by the Ku Klux Klan. Viola was assassinated on March 25th, 1965. The power of death is great and it is real. A life once taken cannot be returned, and the world is poorer without it. Faced with this truth, it is easy to think of violence, the strength and the will to do harm, as the final measure of power, just as did the king in the Buddhist story of the ibex. But there is a greater power than the power to kill, and that is the capacity to face death and to choose life. To do what is compassionate, what is merciful, what is just, even though it means great personal risk. What is greater than death is the courage that will not be moved by the threat of death. When the hunter who has chased you will die without your help, and you climb down into the hole with him and help him up, risking your life to save his. The deaths of 2 white Northerners, particularly a white minister, captured the national attention in a way that untold death and violence against black people had not up to that point. The Voting Rights Act passed in the wake of the horrible events in Selma, addressing the original cause for which Jimmy Lee Jackson had given his life. Speaking of Viola Liuzzo, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "If physical death is the price some must pay to save us and our white brothers from eternal death of the spirit, then no sacrifice could be more redemptive." Here, and I believe our tradition, would disagree, in as much as there is no such thing as a redemptive sacrifice. A life lost is a life lost. It is always a thing which ought not to be. But it is possible for justice and hope to follow after dying. Good may come from bad, though the bad is never erased by the good. The teacher Jesus is said to have said, if someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn and offer them your left. Yet another example of someone following a peaceful ethos and being killed for it. But while much of Christianity for the past 2,000 years has held Jesus' most important quality to be his death, our tradition would offer that his most important quality was his willingness to risk being killed. He had the courage to preach against the injustices of his age and to confront the wealthy and powerful whom they benefited. That came with the risk that they would seek to be rid of him, and the willingness to continue despite that risk animated his ministry. Inasmuch, he was following the example of his own spiritual ancestors, taking the same role as Moses played when he stood before Pharaoh to declare, "Let my people go," practicing the same courage Nathan showed when he told King David the story of a man who had badly wronged another and then declared, "Sire, thou art the man," showing the same courage that Esther demonstrated when she went off to see the king without his invitation, a transgression that carried an automatic death sentence unless he showed her some special mercy. And at making her decision to go, she declared that, "If I die, I die." When he first applied to enter fellowship as Unitarian Universalist minister, James Reeb wrote, "I want to participate in the continuous creation of a vision that will inspire our people to noble and courageous living. I want to share actively in the adventure of trying to forge the spiritual ties that will bind mankind together in brotherhood and peace." He proved himself willing to risk his life for that, just as did Martin Luther King, who confronted his adversaries with passion but refused to stop acknowledging their fundamental humanity. Every living thing has at least one reason to live for. It isn't easy necessarily to know what yours is or to hold on to it. But harder still is the question of what you are willing to risk your life for. What cause or value or ideal is so important that you will continue it even when the threat is mortal and great? For what are you willing to risk your life? That is the question that I see before us, placed by this national holiday, by the memory of our spiritual ancestors, and by the moment in history at which we all find ourselves residing together.
Every
to this time of giving and receiving, where we give freely and generously to this offering which sustains and strengthens our community here, and also the work of our outreach offering recipient, who this week is the King Coalition of Madison and Dane County. Established in the fall of 1985, the King Coalition is a community group that plans the official City of Madison and Dane County observances of MLK Day, and FUS is a proud partner in this coalition. There's multiple ways to share your gifts. Baskets being passed here in the room. You can also donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org, and you will see on the screen the text to give information as well. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together. We gather together each week, bringing with us the cares and concerns of our lives and those of the lives we love. We bring them here and share them knowing they are held in support and in care. We light a candle of grief and sorrow for two young ones who passed away this week, Bridget and Persephone. We send our love to their families and to all who love and miss them. And we light a candle of warmth for all who may need it, whether emotional or physical, may all have the warmth they need. And we light a candle for all those joys and sorrows, the hopes and the dreams that live in the silence of our hearts. If you'll join us now in an attitude of prayer and meditation with these words from Alicia Ford. When we pause to remember who we are, companions on this grand experiment called life, when we take a moment to shed the ways in which we have been carefully taught, to lead from fear, to punish the poor, to persecute those who don't look like we do, to deny rights to those who love, to believe that we are separate, that some are superior to others. When we take a moment to shed all of that and hear our stories, hear and see each other into existence, into community, when we take a moment to embrace, to practice a different way of being, when we answer the call of love, then we are living into the promise of building the world we dream about. It is beautiful to dream, to cast a vision, to stretch our minds into the future and imagine what may be if we were to build a new way of being, not someday, but beginning again today. Beginning again every day that we have breath, taking courage with these hands and hearts to make real the dream of a more equitable world, to journey together, seeking to be transformed even as we transform, becoming explorers and learners in this world around us, humbled by what we do not yet know, fulfilling the promise of healing a fragmented world, laboring not just in hope, but also in love. In this spirit we commit, in this spirit we gather, in this spirit we pray. Amen.
Our closing hymn today will be number 199 in the silver and gray hymnal. It's Precious Lord. If you don't know already, this is remembered as being Dr. King's favorite hymn. In particular, at the moment of his assassination, he was in the middle of making plans for the evening service, so that his final words were a request to sing this hymn. Let's sing it together now. Please rise once more in body and or spirit. out now with hearts and hands and minds renewed to the world that is waiting for you. Go out to that world to bring your gentle touch to those in pain. Go out to feed and to house those in need. Go out to speak truth to those with power. Go out with courage to do the work which calls you. Go out now, and with your passion and faith, change the world. Blessed be. Go in peace, and please be at rest for the postlude.